Chosen one, stop scrolling. This isn't about someone leaving you. This is about something no longer being allowed to stay. And if you're honest, you've already felt it. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, consistently. Something has been off. Maybe it's a person who used to feel easy, but now feels heavy. A connection that once felt natural, but now feels forced. A relationship where conversations don't flow the same. Where energy feels uneven. Where something inside you keeps pausing even when everything on the outside looks normal. And you've been trying to explain it away. Maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe I'm just tired. Maybe it's just a phase. But deep down, this isn't new. This didn't just happen overnight. It's not sudden. It's something your spirit has been noticing for a long time. You just didn't want to fully see it, because seeing it would mean you might have to respond to it. And that's the part no one talks about, because it's easier to hold on to something familiar than to face the discomfort of letting it change. So you try to maintain it, you adjust yourself, you become more patient, more understanding, more flexible. But instead of things getting better, you start feeling more tired, not physically, but internally. Because here's the truth most people miss. It's not that God is suddenly taking someone away from you. It's that He is no longer allowing misalignment to stay hidden. What used to be easy to ignore is now becoming impossible to overlook. What you used to tolerate now disturbs your peace. What you used to explain away now keeps returning to your awareness. And that shift can feel uncomfortable, because now you're in between two realities. The one you've been holding on to, and the one you're starting to see clearly. And clarity, even when it's quiet, changes everything. Because the pain you're feeling right now isn't really from loss. It's from finally seeing clearly what you've been trying not to see. That's why it feels heavy. Because part of you still wants to keep it the same, but another part of you already knows it can't stay like this. So you feel tension. The more you try to hold on, the more exhausted you become. The more you try to deny it, the less peace you feel. Because you're no longer aligned, but you're still attached. And that space right there is where transformation begins. So understand this clearly, chosen one. This moment is not about losing someone important. It's about no longer losing yourself trying to keep them. Here's where most people misunderstand what's happening. God doesn't remove people from your life because they are bad. He doesn't do it to punish you, and He doesn't do it because something suddenly went wrong. He removes what no longer aligns with who you are becoming. That's a very different perspective, because now it's not about blaming them. It's about recognizing the shift in you. There are seasons in your life where certain people fit naturally. You think the same, move the same, tolerate the same things. But growth changes that. And when you begin to evolve internally, what once felt normal can start to feel misaligned. Not because they changed, but because you did. You see this pattern all throughout Scripture. Abraham and Lot walked together for a season with no hatred or betrayal, yet they still had to separate. Not because one was wrong, but because where Abraham was going required space Lot couldn't walk into with him. David had to distance himself from Saul, not because he stopped being loyal, but because staying close would have cost him his identity and calling. Even Jesus withdrew from crowds that once followed him, not because he didn't love people, but because he understood that constant access can pull you out of alignment. So understand this clearly, chosen one. Removal is not rejection. It is protection and alignment. There are 3 deeper reasons this happens. First, God removes people to protect your identity. You cannot grow into who you're becoming if you constantly have to shrink to maintain what you've outgrown. You can't keep explaining yourself, lowering your standards, or adjusting your truth just to keep things comfortable. At some point, staying the same becomes more painful than changing, and God sees that moment before you fully accept it. Second, God removes people to break emotional dependency. Attachment can feel like alignment, but they are not the same. Just because you're used to someone doesn't mean they are meant to continue with you. Sometimes what you call love is familiarity, and what you call loyalty is actually fear of letting go. God will gently but firmly break that dependency so you don't build your identity on something unstable, because if your peace depends on someone staying, then your peace was never stable to begin with. Third, God removes people to prepare you for new capacity. The version of you that is emerging cannot be supported by the same environment that shaped your past. New levels require new conversations, new thinking, and new energy, and not everyone is able or willing to meet you there. That doesn't make them wrong, it just means they are not assigned to your next season. If they stay, they may unintentionally slow you down, confuse your direction, or pull you back into patterns you've already outgrown. That's why this matters more than you think. God doesn't just bless your future, He removes what would sabotage it. He sees the long-term impact while you're still emotionally attached to the present. He sees what staying connected will cost you, even if it feels comfortable right now. And that's why it hurts. Because from your perspective, you're losing something that still matters to you. But from God's perspective, He's removing something that can no longer carry you forward. So if this feels painful, understand why. It's because your heart is still letting go, but your spirit has already moved on. That's the tension you feel. Part of you is grieving what was, while another part of you is already stepping into what's next. And that space in between is where maturity is formed. So don't rush it, don't fight it, and don't turn it into something toxic by blaming yourself or blaming them. Just see it clearly. What God removes is never random. It is what your next level cannot carry. Now here is the part that most people avoid, because it requires honesty. You're not in pain because they left. You're in pain because part of you is still attached. And attachment is powerful, not because it's always right, but because it feels familiar. That's what makes this so confusing. On one side, you can clearly feel that something is no longer working. But on the other side, you still feel pulled toward it. And that internal conflict creates the pain you're experiencing. So if you really want to understand what's happening, you have to look deeper. Not at them, but at yourself. Because the reason it's hard to let go has very little to do with what they're doing, and everything to do with what it represents to you. There are 4 main reasons you keep holding on, even when you know something is no longer right. The first one is simple but very powerful. Familiarity feels like safety. When something has been part of your life for a long time, your mind starts to associate it with stability. Even if it's not healthy, even if it drains you, even if it confuses you, it still feels known. And the human mind prefers what is known over what is unknown. So you stay, not because it's right, but because it's familiar. And familiar can feel safer than stepping into something uncertain, even if that uncertainty is actually better for you. The second reason is emotional investment. At some point, you start telling yourself, I've put too much into this to walk away now. Time, energy, attention, emotions, all of it becomes something you don't want to feel like you wasted. So instead of asking, is this still right for me? You start asking, how can I make this work? And that question keeps you stuck. Because now you're not responding to reality anymore. You're trying to justify the past. The third reason is the conflict between hope and reality. This is where it gets deeper. You're not just holding on to the person. You're holding on to who they could be. The version you imagined. The version you believed in. The version you hoped would eventually show up consistently. But here's the truth most people don't want to accept. Potential is not reality. And staying attached to someone's potential will keep you disconnected from what is actually happening right now. That's why it feels so confusing. Because part of you is reacting to what is real, while another part of you is still emotionally invested in what could be. The fourth reason is fear of emptiness. And this one is often hidden. It's not always that you're afraid of them being gone. It's that you're afraid of what comes after. The silence, the space, the absence, the unknown. Because when something leaves, it doesn't just remove a person. It removes a structure in your life. And now there's space where something used to be. And for many people, that space feels uncomfortable. So instead of facing it, they try to fill it again, even if what they're filling it with is not right. You see this in real life all the time. Someone stays in a relationship that drains them because at least it feels like something. Someone keeps a friendship that no longer aligns because they don't want to feel alone. Someone holds onto a connection that is unclear, inconsistent, and confusing, simply because letting go feels harder than staying. But here's the deeper insight you need to understand. You're not holding on to them. You're holding on to a version of life that felt certain. A version where things made sense, where you knew what to expect, where your identity was tied to that connection in some way. And letting go of that means redefining yourself. That's why it feels so intense. Because not every strong connection is meant to stay. Some are meant to wake you up. Some are meant to show you patterns you didn't see before. Some are meant to reveal what you tolerate, what you ignore, what you hope for, and what you actually need. And once you see that clearly, something shifts. Because now it's no longer about them. It's about you. The hardest part is not letting go of them. It's letting go of who you were with them. The version of you that accepted certain behaviors. The version of you that stayed quiet when something felt off. The version of you that kept trying to make something work, even when it was no longer aligned. That's the real release. And that's why healing doesn't start when they leave. Healing starts when you stop trying to recreate what no longer fits. When you stop going back mentally. When you stop replaying conversations. When you stop imagining different outcomes. When you accept that what you had belonged to a version of you that is no longer who you are becoming. That's when peace begins. Not because everything suddenly feels good, but because everything finally feels true. At this point, the question is no longer, why is this happening? The real question becomes, how do I respond correctly when it is happening? Because this is where most people lose their peace. Not in the moment of separation, but in how they react to it. So let's ground this. You don't need to react emotionally. You need to respond with clarity. And there's a difference. Reaction is fast, driven by fear, attachment, and confusion. Response is steady, intentional, and aligned with truth. If you want to move through this without losing yourself, there are 4 things you need to do. First, stop chasing closure. This is one of the biggest traps. You think you need one more conversation, one more explanation, one more moment of clarity from them. But closure does not always come from the other person. In fact, most of the time, it doesn't. Because if they were capable of giving you clarity, you wouldn't have been confused in the first place. Closure is not something they give you. It's something you allow yourself when you accept what has already been shown. Second, accept what is being revealed instead of rewriting reality. This is where honesty matters. Not the version you hoped for. Not the version you imagined. Not the version you're still emotionally attached to. But what is actually happening. How they show up. How you feel around them. What consistently repeats. When you keep trying to reinterpret reality to make it more comfortable, you delay your own growth. But when you accept it as it is, even if it hurts, you create space for clarity. Third, protect your peace intentionally. Peace is not something that just happens. It is something you choose. And sometimes that choice looks like distance. It looks like not replying immediately. It looks like not engaging in conversations that drain you. It looks like stepping back, even when part of you wants to step forward. Distance is not rejection. It is alignment. It is you recognizing that staying close to what disrupts you will only pull you further away from who you are becoming. Fourth, trust the process before you fully understand it. This is the hardest part, because your mind wants answers now. It wants clarity now. It wants everything to make sense immediately. But growth does not always work like that. Sometimes you understand later. Sometimes clarity comes after you move, not before. And this is where faith becomes practical. Not emotional, not dramatic, but steady. You keep moving in the direction of peace, even if you cannot explain everything yet. Scripture says, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts." That word rule is important. It means peace is not just a feeling. It is a decision maker. It is what you allow to guide you when logic is unclear and emotions are loud. And this leads to the most important insight in this part. Peace is not what you feel after everything is fixed. Peace is what guides you before you make the wrong move. It shows up as a quiet check, a hesitation, a lack of alignment. And if you ignore it, you end up learning the hard way. But if you follow it, you avoid what was never meant for you. So in this moment, don't focus on fixing everything. Don't focus on making it all make sense immediately. Focus on staying aligned, staying clear, staying grounded. Because sometimes obedience does not look like holding on tighter. Sometimes obedience is knowing when to release, even when part of you is still learning how to let go. At the end of all this, you need to understand something clearly. This is not loss. It just feels like loss because you're measuring it with your past instead of your growth. You didn't lose them. You outgrew what you used to tolerate. And that shift is not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it happens quietly. You just start noticing what you didn't notice before. You start feeling what you used to ignore. You start recognizing what no longer fits, even if it once meant everything to you. And that can feel confusing, because part of you still remembers the connection, but another part of you can no longer stay the same inside it. This is where maturity begins. God is not removing love from your life. He is removing confusion from it. He is separating what feels intense from what is actually aligned. Because not everything that feels strong is meant to stay. Not everything that feels familiar is meant to continue. Not everyone is meant to stay. Not every connection is destiny. Not every ending is loss. Some endings are clarity. Some endings are protection. Some endings are the exact space your next level needs in order to exist. And this is the shift. You stop asking, why is this being taken from me? And you start asking, what is this making room for? Because where you are going requires more clarity, more stability, more alignment than where you've been. And you cannot carry everything forward. Not the confusion, not the emotional weight, not the version of you that kept holding on to what was already fading. So if this message helped you see your situation differently, take a second to anchor that clarity. Like this video as a quiet agreement with yourself that you're choosing alignment over attachment. Subscribe to Chosen by God if you want messages that don't just sound spiritual, but actually help you think clearly and move wisely. And if this resonates with you, comment, I release what no longer aligns. Because this moment is not about losing something important. It's about finally becoming someone who no longer needs to hold on to what isn't right. God is not taking something from you. He is making sure you don't carry the wrong thing into your future.